Good evening, everyone. Welcome. This is the regularly scheduled meeting for Tuesday, July the 15th. Ms. Hilbrick, will you please call roll?
Yes, sir. Councilman De La Garza?
I am present.
Councilman Kidder?
Here.
Councilwoman Butler?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Young?
Here.
Councilman Lofgren?
Here.
And Mayor Crocker.
Here. If you would, please rise, join me for the pledges, followed by a moment of silence. Thank you. Please be seated. Again, welcome everyone. We will jump straight into the agenda. First agenda item is item B1, announcements. It will be a little bit different this evening in that I am going to take the reins, make the first announcement. We'll get some additional information and then we'll follow up with our further announcements after that. So I wanted to read some prepared remarks I made with respect to this evening. As I'm certain you're all keenly aware, our community has faced a serious challenge in recent days with the failure of our water system to meet the standards established by TCEQ. The resulting boil water notice is not just an inconvenience, it is a breach of public trust. And while immediate steps are being taken to restore compliance and ensure the safety of our water supply, we must be clear, and I want to repeat my previously stated position on this matter, which is shared by all of council, that this incident with our water supply was unacceptable and it demands a thorough review and accounting. The first step in that process begins this evening. I'm announcing this evening the formation of a council committee, which I will head up, and be joined by two members of City Council, Mayor Pro Tem Dr. Andrew Young and Councilwoman Jan Scott. Thank you to both of you, Ms. Scott in her absence, for agreeing to participate with me on that committee. This committee is tasked with conducting a thorough investigation into the root cause of the water quality failure, examining every aspect of the system, technical, operational, and organizational, to determine what went wrong, why it happened, and how we prevent it from ever happening again. Our work will follow a clear, structured process. We will reconstruct and verify the full timeline of events. We will review treatment protocols and equipment performance. We will evaluate the condition of our water-related infrastructure, scrutinize oversight and accountability measures, and engage with both city staff and other resources as we may determine to be necessary. We will also assess the impact and feasibility of immediate implementation of an upgraded SCADA system and other monitoring technologies, recognizing that modernization may be essential to ensuring future reliability. No issue will be off the table and no question will go unasked. I want to be very clear that the public will have a window into the work of this committee. The committee's findings and recommendations will be shared with this council and with the public. The citizens of Victoria deserve answers, accountability, and action. The safety and confidence of our community are paramount. We obviously cannot undo what has already occurred, but we can and must make the changes necessary to ensure it doesn't happen again. This committee will help lead that effort, and I am personally committed to seeing it through for the betterment of our city and for the benefit of our citizens. So that then sets the path forward in terms of the immediate first step to address this issue. I know it's still ongoing, and this evening I've asked staff and Mr. Garza specifically to provide us with an update on the issue and the present status of the boil water notice. So I will turn announcements over to Mr. Garza for information on that. Good evening, Mr. Garza.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for the opportunity to provide an update on the ongoing boil water notice. Before I begin the formal presentation, I want to echo your sentiment, Mayor, that this certainly is something that is unacceptable. I echo that sentiment, but I also want to make clear that I take full responsibility as city manager for any element of this that might have been preventable, whether that be through the lack of technology, training, or anything else. At the end of the day, I recognize that as city manager, it is my sole job to ensure that our entire organization and city and all the services that we provide are performed in a professional and reputable manner, in a manner that continues to grow the trust of the community. And it's not lost on me that this situation has taken a blow to that trust. I assure you that everybody involved with this situation internally has taken that responsibility very personally. You mentioned, Mayor, the need to potentially improve technology. That is 100% accurate. In the absence of having greater technology, there is a very human-centric element to the operation of our utility. And the pro of that is that it helps build a lot of ownership. And so I can tell you that the folks that are involved with managing and keeping up our water system every day are equally frustrated, angry, and upset at the situation because they take great pride in the work that they do every day. And I want to thank them for their continued commitment. It's not easy to continue pushing through and trying to solve these problems while we know that it's creating a challenge for our community. And in the midst of a lot of questions, criticism, feedback, which rightfully so, but I commend them for their perseverance throughout this effort into getting us out of this situation. And hopefully we'll have an update for you by the end of this council meeting. And so with that, this is the overview of my remarks today. I know that many of you saw my remarks or heard my remarks from over the weekend. Today's presentation is intended to take somewhat of a deeper dive since I have a little bit more time, and quite frankly, have had more time to look into some of these issues and to confirm some of the timeline elements that began last week. And so the sequence of events that I'll go over today have been personally confirmed by me and solely focus on what transpired last week into this week. To the mayor's point, the more long-term timeline to help us understand what led up to the events is yet to be finalized, and that'll be, of course, part of the work of the committee. I'll take a little bit of a deeper dive into the city's response and share some initial takeaways and a couple of next steps. I thought it would be appropriate as part of the system overview to remind you of the geography of our system. One of the things that I really want to focus on in today's update is the geography element of it. You heard me mention over the weekend that this was a localized issue in a very particular part of town, and I want to shed a little bit more light on that because it was one of the most frustrating things for me about this whole situation was the fact that we had to put the entire system under this boil water notice, even though we knew that it really wasn't a system-wide issue. And so I want to remind you of the fact that we have two pressure planes. We have the high pressure plane and the low pressure plane. The easiest way to think of these is using Mockingbird as a reference. It's not identical, but it's a good guiding line. Everything above Mockingbird is part of the high pressure plane. Everything below Mockingbird or around the Mockingbird area is in the low pressure plane. This distinction is important because the way that the water system is distributed among our community is very relevant to this reality of the two pressure planes. So as an example, to the high pressure plane or the north pressure plane as it's sometimes referred, those water towers that provide water on the north side of town are directly fed through the surface water treatment plant. They don't have to run through the system. And that's because it's a gravity fed system. Gravity feeds the lines from the north side of town all the way through. The low pressure plane and the water towers 3 and 5 are filled up through the former water plant 3 that still provides that resource. And so it's kind of more through the system, if you will. And I'll show you a map here in a second when I show you the affected area, because that affected area is more related to the low pressure plane than it is the high pressure plane. You heard me over the weekend talk about a very specific area at the intersection of John Stockbauer and Miori. That's denoted here with a green star to give you a sense of where that area and that intersection is in comparison to the pressure plane map that I just shared. And so you can very clearly see how this location is in the low pressure plane of our community and also very in close proximity to water towers number 3 and number 5. So this particular issue that took place at the intersection of John Stockbauer and Miori is really ultimately what brought TCEQ to our community on Tuesday, July 8th. I know that over the weekend I shared a timeline that suggested that staff was aware of the issue on Monday, July 7th, but I think the details of pre-TCEQ involvement, I think, ought to be a little bit more fleshed out as part of the more thorough investigation into the matter. And so I'm focused on the confirmed sequence of events that I described earlier. And so we know with certainty that TCEQ was on site on Tuesday, July 8th, and basically did some testing. That testing resulted in a concern around the chlorine residual at that testing site. One of the things that is very common when issues like this arise, any water system across the whole state, is that TCEQ allows systems 24 hours to rectify the issue. This is regardless of whether it's an issue that they uncovered or an issue that we self-report. At the end of the day, it's a very common 24-hour grace period that TCEQ gives you to solve that issue. In everyday operations of the utility system, there are going to be situations that warrant adjusting chemical levels or adjusting other things in order to ensure compliance of the system. Things that might alter that might necessitate a response would be things like a water line break. Anytime there's a water line break and we have just water that just escapes the system, could potentially threaten, obviously, the quality of the water when that break happens. Other things that sometimes trigger staff ability to, in a moment's notice, adjust things would be when we maybe switch from river water to off-channel reservoir water. We sometimes receive feedback from the public that sometimes the water tastes earthy, right? And so we all recognize that there are instances that trigger the need to adjust chemicals or treatment processes, and TCEQ always allows 24 hours to do that. And so this was no different. They notified us and said, hey, you have 24 hours to solve this chlorine residual issue at that particular intersection. Immediately, staff increased chloramines, which is basically increase the chloramines coming out of the surface water treatment plant to ensure that the levels of the chloramines across the entire system were in as good shape as it can be. And staff immediately went to the solution that usually works in a similar situation. It is protocol to do flushing, right? And the concept of flushing is very simple. Eliminate the water that might be not in good shape and replace it with cleaner water. And so anytime that staff, as I mentioned, comes across, let's say, a water line break, and they fix that water line break, that area is flushed. And so, again, that's a very common practice. And so staff conducted what we're referring to as part of this overview, a localized flush. Ultimately, on Wednesday, July 9th, it was determined that that localized flushing technique was unsuccessful, consequently surpassing the 24-hour grace period that TCEQ gives any utility. And so ultimately, we had to issue the boil water notice on Wednesday, July 9th, which we ended up issuing at around 8 p.m. that evening. Immediately, staff delved into the second phase, not the second phase, but the second element or the next best solution to help solve the issue. And so as this situation progressed, the solution progressed along with it. And so at that point, the decision was made by staff to conduct a system-wide flush. So again, the localized flushing didn't work. So now let's clean the whole system to hopefully at the end of the day, help that area meet the residual that is needed to be met. And that system flush, unfortunately, is time consuming. In essence, it's what it suggests. It's flushing the entire system. And so it takes two overnights to do that because we cannot leave the system without water for fire protection or for other things. We can't just clear out the water tower or the storage tanks in one go. And so that's done always in 2 phases over 2 evenings. And so that's what happened. A couple of the towers were flushed out through the evening of Wednesday night, and then 2 others through the evening of Thursday night. It was the expectation of everybody involved in this effort that the system-wide flush was gonna be successful. And as a matter of fact, when we got into Friday and we decided to schedule that first briefing that took place on Friday at 3 p.m., it was our intent, and we even had speaking points that were drafted for that press briefing to convey at that press briefing that we had resolved the issue and that we were simply just waiting for the bacterial testing and that we would be rescinding the boil water notice on Saturday. At 2 p.m. on Friday, we received word that the system-wide flush was unsuccessful. So we had to change course, and at the press briefing on Friday, basically didn't have the solution in the original successful message that we were anticipating, and we're left with no other option other than to convey that we're still working on it. I recognize that that is not a message of strong leadership and not a strong message of strong resolve. but that's how it played out. Now, even though we had full faith in the system-wide flush being successful, staff throughout all of Thursday was already game planning on different scenarios, such as, well, what do we do if it doesn't work? And so the thought had already crossed the mind of staff to suggest, what if we move up the chlorine conversion? And so conversations with TCEQ started happening on Thursday about what if we had to move up the chlorine conversion as a last ditch effort to solve this issue. And we had to activate that plan that afternoon of Friday, July 11th, shortly after the press briefing. We received wording from TCEQ that it was okay to move that up. We met all notification requirements prior to launching that, and that exercise began on Saturday. Now,
Can you clarify what you mean by move up the chlorine conversion?
sure.
I think I know what you mean, but I want to make sure everybody's clear
Yeah,
on that.
so every year, I'll slide to this slide. So every year, we actually conduct a chlorine conversion exercise, which is intended to clean the system. This is literally a screenshot of the TCEQ website that hits on the temporary free chlorine conversion effort, which is a highly utilized effort, highly promoted and encouraged by TCEQ. So this isn't anything out of the ordinary. This chlorine conversion is something, again, that we've done every year for the 25 years that we've had the surface water treatment plant. And this year specifically, it was scheduled to begin on August 1st. And why a system does this once a year? Well, because every system over the course of the year obviously might have some issues that arise. You might have some nitrates, right term? The nitrates that build up in the system, and so you have to go through this process to clear that out once a year. And so again, it's a very common practice. We were simply looking at getting permission to execute that sooner. And that's what we ended up receiving on that Friday evening and started Saturday morning, which I'll get into. One of the biggest questions that, of course, has come up throughout this whole process is, well, what does it take to get out of the boil water notice? And ultimately, as we've expressed, it necessitates, well, in this instance, it was two steps. It was ensuring that we met the chlorine residual. That was step one. And that's a process that TCEQ was very involved with and was basically just giving us the green light. And then second, per TCEQ guidelines, it was doing the bacterial testing to ensure that there's no bacteria in the system. And that's the test that takes 24 hours. In preparation of the sampling, there was a collaborative effort between staff and TCEQ to come up with 16 sample sites. And so to give you a sense of the geography of this particular challenge, 13 out of the 16 sample sites were between Mockingbird and Red River. To give you a sense of the localized nature of the concern, which again started at one intersection, and then for purposes of TCEQ compliance, 13 out of the 16 sample sites were sort of sandwiched in between Mockingbird and Red River, because again, this concern that TCEQ conveyed was a concern only for the low pressure plane. And in case you're wondering, we did ask TCEQ, could we issue a boil water notice only for the low pressure plane? Because we all know that the high pressure plane is not impacted by this. And the answer was no. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the system is interconnected. They don't necessarily look at the gravity element of a system when they make that judgment call. The fact that our system is interconnected is all that mattered to them, and why we were required to issue the notice for the entire system, in spite of the fact that we know that physics did not make this an issue on the north pressure plane or the high pressure plane. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the more frustrating things for me about this whole thing was not being able to narrow down this boil water notice, but we did try. So as I mentioned, on Saturday morning at 7 a.m., we began the chlorine conversion. In essence, the chlorine conversion is the system-wide flush. And so basically the direction and the goal was to get rid of all the water that was in the system and replenish it with the water that had this stronger, if you will, chlorine element to it. This is, residents might be feeling that their water tastes like chlorine. It's still safe, but it tastes like chlorine, right? And again, we go through this process every year, and we already know that we're already receiving feedback that people are beginning to taste the chlorine, right? But that's the chlorine conversion doing its work. And it is safe to do that, even per the TCEQ the TCEQ website and direction. And so again, that process took 2 nights for the same reasons as I described before for the system-wide flush, in that we had to flush 2 towers over the night Saturday, and then 2 towers over the night on Sunday. And then yesterday, on Monday, we met the chlorine residuals as expected after the chlorine conversion did its thing. And so from that perspective, that worked. And so yesterday, we received the green light to go ahead and take those 16 samples, as I mentioned earlier, and that I showed you a map of. And that particular test takes 24 hours to incubate and to get results. And so we expect to receive those results by 7 p.m. this evening, and then ultimately be able to hopefully shortly after that rescind the boil water notice. But I want to make it very clear that that hasn't happened, and hopefully happens while we're in this meeting. So a little bit about the city's response. I want to begin this section of the presentation by trying to make a distinction. Anytime there's a boil water notice is unacceptable. It's not good for the system. There's no scenario where a boil water notice and being under one is a good thing. However, there are degrees of severity of boil water notices, with the 2 biggest differences being that you can be under a boil water notice where you don't have water pressure, or you're under a boil water notice with water pressure. In recent history, Victoria has been in boil water notices where there's been water pressure issues. Think Hurricane Harvey, think Winter Storm Uri, where there was, in Harvey's case, there was legitimately loss of water. And in Winter Uri's scenario, there was loss of water pressure. How you respond and react to those different types of boil water notices is completely different. And so I want to make it clear that our response was adequately measured to match the fact that we are under a boil water notice with water pressure. One of the very first things that we did was, of course, engage the Office of Emergency Management for a number of reasons. One, we didn't know what we didn't know. And just out of common practice, it just made sense to engage them in case we needed to activate more elements of the Office of Emergency Management. If we needed to access state resources, there's a lot of things that come from activating the EOC, which we never did, but we engaged Rick and his team early on so that they'd be part of this process from the beginning. So I'll walk you through a little bit of their role. I'm gonna hit on our role in communications, which in a situation like this is probably the biggest thing that falls on our plate, is just how we communicate to the public. And then I'll walk you through a little bit of the utility rebate that I alluded to during Saturday's press briefing. So as I mentioned with Rick's team, it was for situation awareness, but more importantly, they were engaged because out of the Office of Emergency Management stem some very specific partners on the medical side. And so we do rely on the STRAC, or the Golden Crescent RAC, which basically represents a lot of the hospitals and medical facilities and has direct contact with them. In addition, part of Rick's team, he has a full-time employee who is a public health emergency preparedness coordinator, and that individual has direct contact with nursing homes, dialysis center, and some other sort of lower critical medical-centric facilities. And so it was important early on to engage with Rick and his team to ensure that those facilities were aware of what was going on and they could implement their respective plans. There was a lot of communication with both CEOs from the hospital, personally on my part, to ensure that their plans were activated to limit any disruptions at those critical sites, because obviously that's critical for any community during any type of situation. And of course, the EOC has their own communication platforms that they helped us with throughout this whole ordeal. On our communication efforts, I'm gonna speak just about a few of these, but in essence, we approached it through a variety of different means. And so of course, there's a traditional media approach, right, which is through news releases, and we're relying on our great partners like Crossroads Today, Victoria Advocate, really relying on them to help us spread the word. I am gonna take a deeper dive into the Alert Center. We of course use social media. We did the live press conferences, which were on TV 15 live, which was great, and of course information on our website. I do want to spend a minute hitting on the Everbridge mass notification system, or what you might maybe are referring to as the City Alert Center. This was a program that was implemented in 2024. And so this all came out this came out of Winter Storm Uri. And so any time that we go through a situation like this, we conduct very thorough after action reviews and try and identify where could we be better. And we recognize after Winter Storm Uri that we could have done better as it relates to notifying citizens about what was going on. At the same time of trying to improve ways to do it during situations like this, we were also trying to improve our ability to communicate with utility customers, with our garbage customers, right? We just wanted to use technology to be able to notify somebody if we're running late to pick up their trash. If there's a water line break in their neighborhood, we could geofence it to just send messages to that particular neighborhood. And so we were wanting to use technology just to help us notify people. And this was the first instance of this magnitude that we use this system. And so we ended up sending messages to over 23,000 subscribers, either through email, text, or phone call, depending on what their preferences. And so this is literally the most people we've been able to reach in a situation like this, thanks to this system that we implemented just last year. Up until this point, we've been able to register 372 new registrants, and we're constantly communicating to people to visit victoriatx.gov /alert center to sign up. And I'm sorry, actually, I forgot to include the graphic you sent me. I'm not gonna focus too much on this other to convey that we saw a high levels of engagement on social media, a lot of views. Again, just validating the fact that we were trying to just reach as many people as possible with updates, regardless of what the update was, right? And regardless of how people might react to the update, our priority was just getting news out. And so we were able to do that, again, through a variety of different means. And one of the things that was somewhat refreshing was that our partners over at Crossroads Today, they put out a daily poll. And one of their polls actually asked, how people felt, if they felt that they were being kept informed about water safety. And you'll see that even on Crossroads Today, you had 68% of people communicate that, yes, they felt that communication had been clear. And if you lump in the somewhat response to that, it gets us above 3/4 of respondents who were acknowledged receipt of information. Obviously, this isn't a scientific poll, but it at least gives us some insight as to the job that Ashley and her team helped spearhead throughout this effort on the communication side. Lastly, on the response element, I want to hit on the rebate part of it, because I know that's garnered quite a bit of attention and quite a bit of feedback. And so I want to remind you of a few things. And so obviously in our form of government as city manager, I only have certain level of authority, and I have to work within those boundaries, right? I, for example, don't have the authority to gift the public money. I don't have the authority to make a financial decision that might make your adopted budget make it out of sync, right? And so when we were thinking, how can we assist individuals, we had to take a very methodical, deliberate way into figuring out how to do that, because it had to be justifiable. Again, I don't have the authority to do this unilaterally as a gift to the public. I have to justify it to you. I have to justify it to the taxpayers, to the ratepayers, to our financial auditors. I have to justify it to a lot of people. And so there was a lot of thought that went into coming up with a $10 rebate that I want to share with you this evening to shed some light on that, because I intentionally did not explain how we came up with the $10 rebate on Saturday, because I made the conclusion that trying to explain what I'm about to explain to you was the last thing people wanted to hear on Saturday. And I just made the decision to correlate the $10 credit to the cost of a case of water, because I made the assumption that that would be a relatable comparison. So as I explain the rationale, just as a quick refresher, on people's utility bills, they get charged 3 different things: water services, sewer services, and garbage services. Gilbert and I worked together on this, and one of the very first things we did was trying to figure out, okay, well, what are the rates? What is the average usage? Let's try and find a way to come up with a rebate. And so 8,000 gallons a month of water is the average use for our residents. Base rate, $18.21. Little information on the sewer services with the base rate at $22.68. This is an example water bill. So what you see on the right-hand side of $31.71, that is the average water bill for our customers that have a 3/4 size meter, which is mostly houses. There are about 21,000 of those. Part of the rationale that we came up with early on was, okay, looks like we might be in this situation for a week. Let's try and basically rebate a customer a week's worth of a credit to account for the 1 week that this situation was ongoing out of the month. And so a couple of examples that I shared there at the bottom, because we ran these scenarios, 1 week of a water base rate, which is that rate of $18.21, only yields a rebate of $4.55. I said, that's not enough. We then said, okay, well, let's look at the $31.71. 1/4 of that, or 1 week of that, would be $7.93. And I said, that's not enough. We need to think of something else. And so ultimately, we landed on trying to incorporate the sewer base rate into the equation. And we decided to just land on the base rates. And so we basically combined the water and the sewer base rate, which equates to about $40 or $10 rounded up to account for 1 week out of the month. And so it was, again, very intentional, logical approach to coming up with the $10 because, again, I don't have the authority as city manager to simply come up with a figure to gift to our customers. It had to follow a very specific, defendable, justifiable formula. And this is the one that Gilbert and I came up with over the weekend and that I announced on Saturday. Now, if you're wondering how much is that costing us, so this reflects us applying that $10 credit, not only for those 21,000 single-family homes that I mentioned are on that 3/4 size meter, but we went ahead and just applied that across the board. And so you see that that equates to about $234,000, and we were very intentional at the bottom to make a note that even with that, we still expect, again, I have to work under the confines of the budget, that we still expect to fall within where we expect it to be at the end of the year, and there'll be no negative impact to our cash flow or even our minimum reserve. So a couple of takeaways. The mayor already hit on some of these, but from my perspective, these after action reviews go a little bit above and beyond just the just the particulars around the water utility aspect of it. And so as I alluded to earlier, after we go through any one of these situations, we conduct after action reviews. And so I anticipate that we will do one for the communication side of the house to figure out how can we find better ways to communicate to the public. We did find some kinks with the Everbridge that we're working on addressing and fixing that we know we need to improve on. The external community response plans, this is huge. I think we really need to take a deep dive into collaborating with our partners such as the health department, who has more direct communication with restaurants, to try and come up with a better plan. Because if one thing has become very evident through this process is that you have a lot of local business owners, restaurants, et cetera, that are responding to this boil water notice as if it was a boil water notice without water pressure. And so clearly there's an opportunity to develop a better plan to educate restaurants and other folks on the differences on what you can and cannot do when there's water and what you can and cannot do when there isn't water. And so we recognize that that could be part of an after action review in collaboration with folks like at the health department. And then internally, not anything that I've talked about publicly, but obviously in the midst of any situation, we still have to ensure that we're operating on all cylinders, right? Police, fire, other essential personnel, right? And so we did implement an internal plan over the weekend. And so we'll reassess that as well, just to ensure that we're prepared as much as possible to support our first responders and anybody else that needs to be working whenever there's a situation of any kind going on. The mayor already alluded to the SCADA. I do plan on providing some more information on a way to potentially expedite the SCADA project under city manager's report and the CIP update. And of course, the biggest takeaway for me is, of course, the work of this committee that the mayor has announced this evening. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about the last week.
Thank you, Mr. Garza. Does anyone have any questions about the information covered there? No. Certainly, I think there's a lot of questions that remain going forward, but you've done a good job of informing us and the public in terms of kind of how we got to where we are at this point, and we'll await further news on the boil water notice. And we appreciate the efforts that have been put in, not only by yourself, but also by Mr. Gill and Greg and their staff to do everything they can. I know that it has been a frustrating process. We were frustrated we were there and frustrated we were having to deal with it. And getting out of it was no easy task. But we do appreciate the work that's gone into it. And there'll be further work around this, no doubt. So,
100%.
yes. Thank you very much.
thank you.
I believe then you may have a couple of other announcements for us as we're still under that item of the agenda.
I do. It seems a little weird to transition from that to this, but high school students with an interest in civic involvement can apply to serve on the Mayor's Youth Council for the upcoming school year. The program is open to high school juniors and seniors attending school in Victoria County, including homeschool students. Applications for the 2025-2026 school year are open and must be received with a letter of recommendation by August 31st. For more information or to apply, please visit victoriatx.gov/youth council or contact Keisha Smith in my office at 361-485-3030. In addition, our Development Services Department is seeking 2 residents to serve on the Planning Commission for 3-year terms that end in August 2028. The commission reviews and approves new residential and commercial developments to ensure that city codes related to the development are applied and makes recommendations to City Council about variance requests that conflict with city code. Applications are due by July 31st and can be found at victoriatx.gov/boards commissions or in the city secretary's office. And I do have a reminder about municipal court and the child safety grants, but Tiffany will hit on that in greater detail in a short presentation later in the meeting agenda.
All right, thank you. Do we have any public and employee recognitions this evening?
I do.
Okay.
The Victoria Fire Department has been officially recognized by the American Heart Association for achieving requirements outlined in the 2025 mission Lifeline. The Victoria Fire Department is part of an elite group of pre-hospital providers recognized by the American Heart Association for our commitment and success in implementing a higher standard of care by ensuring that every patient receives treatment according to nationally accepted evidence-based guideline recommendations and standards. This is the 10th consecutive gold award that the department has received. So Chief Gamas, thank you and your crews for all that you do.
Congratulations, Chief, and everybody at VPD. Good job. Or Fire Department, I'm sorry, VPD.
He's not gonna let go of that one.
No, sorry, Chief.
I do have something-
You can chastise me later. No
I
problem.
do have something for the Victoria Police Department. You might have seen it, but the Victoria Police Department has met Texas Gold Standard in law enforcement accreditation from the Texas Police Chiefs Association Foundation. You heard Chief Young speak about this during his budget presentation. This is the 5th time that our police department has been awarded the recognized law enforcement agency status. Of the 2,800 police agencies in Texas, only 218 are recognized as having met compliance with over 173 best practices that cover all aspects of law enforcement operations. And so, Chief Young, thank you for continuing that excellence in our police department.
Congratulations, Chief.
That's all I got.
All right, thank you. Are there any items from council? No? Okay, well, we will jump then into citizens' communication. I have 3 cards this evening. The first one is Blanca and Bobby Jimenez.
Yeah, the microphone.
Good evening.
Good evening, welcome.
Come on, Mom, you could do it.
My name is Blanca Jimenez. I am 75 years old. Don't really like this age, but unfortunately, I've had some mishaps. I'm gonna let my son take over.
Hi, my name is Robert R. Lopez. I'm the middle son of Blanca Estela Jimenez. Ladies and gentlemen of Victoria, I am a certified master carpenter for the Carpenters Union. I am an instructor for the UBC, United Brotherhood of Carpenters, the University of Texas, and now I've been helping out at the Victoria Community College, teaching some of the youngsters how to become skilled craftsmen. I came back to help Mom out 9 months ago at the end of November, December. Mom hired a gentleman, an unlicensed, uncertified plumber to help her at her residence to upgrade the plumbing. For the last 9 months, Mom has been having to sponge bathe because the gentleman tore up her backyard, left her without any urinals, no showers, and she's been sponge bathing for the last 9 months. So we could use your help. Mom's roof is also leaking. I could build Mom a big old castle, but I still need a plumber and I need an electrician that are certified, but Mom could use your help. And if anybody taught me how to get up when I fall, it's my mom. She would shake me off and she would dust me off and tell me to keep on going. But my son, I'm gonna be leaving next Friday. My son is a fireman for Manchaca Fire Department. His name is Dylan Lopez. He used to work for Victoria Fire Department. My son is broke down with PTSD trauma for the second time. So I'm gonna have to get going, but if there's any way we could get my mom some help to get her roof from leaking and get her some a working toilet and a shower. 9 months, you guys, 9 months, Mom's been going through hell. You know, pardon my French, but that's just the way it is, you know. And if I could teach any of your youngsters how to be a master craftsman, carpenter, I'm gonna do it, you know, and they'll be certified and they're gonna go be licensed and bonded, you know. But the gentleman that came in from Corpus Christi, he just, when you guys had that freeze over the winter, he just took all of his tools and left. Left the big old ditch all torn up in the backyard and no bathroom facilities. Mom has only a working sink in the kitchen, a working sink in both bathrooms, and that's it. All of her appliances are broken, so Mom could use some help. Yes, sir.
Good. Well, thank you for your comments. We
Thank you,
appreciate it.
sir.
Thank you.
All right. Next card I have is Wilma Edwards.
Yeah, she was real impatient, you know.
Miss Edwards left, okay.
Tuesday, the long speech.
Well, Mr. Von der Rohe, you happen to be the third card I had, so while you're up, come on forward. Welcome.
He usually gives short speeches. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Michael Von der Rohe. I live at 2107 North Ben Jordan. Thanks for Jesus and Ken for addressing the water issue. And Jesus don't have a bag full of $10 bills that he's giving out or cases of water. A lot of people think he's giving out people $10 bills or cases of water. They're going to just reduce the water bill. And also, yesterday I was trying to eat in a restaurant, and they just have drive-throughs, I guess because of the water issues. And I finally found one good restaurant to eat at, and it was at the Salvation Army, you know. And they boiled their tea and stuff, so you know it's good. And you can't beat the price. I've never seen such a good deal. But I want to thank the Salvation Army for opening it up. That was the only place you could dine in, and I like to dine in because my air condition don't work for my car, you know. So I also don't want the restaurants to have to close down and they have to lay off the workers, you know, because the waiters only get like $2.11 an hour and they ain't making no tips if it's just dining and stuff like that. And I also want to thank Davelia Services for concreting the trailer park at Victoria Oaks Trailer Park, and they put asphalt on the other side. But I also want to complain about the trailer park owner. There's a branch that fell on someone's vehicle, and it messed it up. And the trailer park owner, he's wanting the tenants to take care of the branches, and it's his responsibility to take care of the branches because he owns it, and there's lots of branches that need to be taken care of. And there are several mailboxes that don't have lids, and sometimes the mailboxes are off it, completely off the post, and there's a big hole about 5 foot wide and 5 foot high, and normally a contractor is going to put like a fence, like a rubber fence around it, you know, to make it safe, and he's not keeping the trailer park safe. And also when he's doing, I just call him an absent owner, you know. He don't like to get involved, you know, only when the city council calls him up, and I would like to see him do a better job at the trailer park. And trailer 29, I would like to condemn it and call it a public nuisance because it's been abandoned for like 3 years and he's turned a blind eye to it. And overall, he's done a poor job and he's raised the lot fee from $225 to $485. And Liberty Real Estate Partners, they say the lot fee's around $300. That's just not correct. But I would like to see him take care of it. You know, he's a multimillionaire and there's no excuses. Thanks and have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Wandera. All right, with that then, we will close citizens' communication, and we will move on to section C, items of public hearings, and I will call up item C1.
Item C1 is an ordinance vacating, closing, and abandoning of .13 acres of public right-of-way known as East Dayton Avenue located between Block 164, Block 165, and GH and SA Railroad right-of-way within the original town site of Victoria in response to a petition of 100% of the adjoining landowners.
Good evening, Ms. Fulgham.
Good evening. So this is a fairly simple request. Jason Moore with Moore Legacy Investments owns all of the property that is outlined in yellow on the picture. And the land that is hatched in red bisects his property. It is Staten Street right-of-way, so he is requesting the abandonment of that. As with all abandonments, we generally recommend approval if the city is not using it to relieve maintenance requirements, provided that the applicants replat the abandoned land into their lot. So he has submitted a preliminary plat that will replat this property into 8 patio home lots and then 1 mixed-use lot. So we're very excited for this development, and we do recommend abandoning this section of Staten Street.
Okay, any questions from Ms. Fulgham on this? No. Thank you for the information. With that then, I will open up the public hearing. If there's anyone who wishes to speak to council on item C1, please come forward at this time. Seeing no one, then I will close the public hearing and entertain any motions with respect to item C1.
Move to approve item C1.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And item C1 is approved. Moving on then to item C2.
Item C2 is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Victoria, Texas, amending Chapter 8, Finance and Taxation of the city's Code of Ordinances to add a new article, Article 4, Short-Term Motor Vehicle Rental Tax, to reflect the adoption of the short-term motor vehicle rental tax within the city to fund an approved venue project as approved by voters at the May 3rd, 2025 special election, providing for the incorporation of premises, providing for an amendment, providing a cumulative repealer clause, providing a severability clause, providing a penalty clause, providing for publication, and providing an effective date.
Good evening, Ms. Lacy. Can you explain all that?
Good evening, and thank you, April, for making it through that. Yes, so this is the second ordinance being presented as a result of our May election. If you realize that the title seems a bit more complicated than the last one for the additional hotel tax, that's because we had to create an additional article under Chapter 8 that has its own requirements under state law. So that's why it's a little bit more involved. But this is for the second half, the short-term motor vehicle rental tax of 5%. That the voters approved, and it will also be effective October 1st of this year, just like the previous one that you approved.
Thank you. Is there any questions about implementation of this? I know that there was detailed information in the packet, so no? All right. Thank you. With that then, I will open up the public hearing with respect to item C2. If there's anyone who wishes to speak to this item, please come forward at this time. Seeing no one then, I will close the public hearing on item C2 and entertain any motions with respect to this item.
I move we adopt C2.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And item C2 is approved. Moving on then to section D, the consent agenda. Ms. Hilberg.
Item D1 is the adoption of minutes of the special meeting held on June 27, 2025, and the irregular meeting held on July 1st, 2025. Item D2 is a resolution approving a contract with Harrison Waldrop and Uherrick LLP to perform the city's annual audit for the year ending September 30th, 2025, in an amount not to exceed $53,500. Item D3 is a resolution approving the Victoria Exchange Development Project for the Victoria Sales Tax Development Corporation. Item D4 is a resolution approving the Cinemark project for the Victoria Sales Tax Development Corporation. Item D5 is a resolution approving the renewal of an annual supply contract with Univar Solutions USA Incorporated for liquid sodium hypochlorite in an amount not to exceed $99,722. Item D6 is a resolution approving the renewal of an annual supply contract with Chemtrade Chemicals US LLC for liquid ammonium sulfate in an amount not to exceed $95,858. Item D7 is a resolution approving the renewal of the annual supply contract with PVSDX Incorporated for liquid sulfur dioxide in an amount not to exceed $114,969. Item DA is a resolution approving the renewal of an annual supply contract with Polydine Incorporated for the wastewater sludge dewatering polymer in an amount not to exceed $64,170. Item D9 is a resolution approving an agreement with Infinity Communications Technologies Incorporated for the purchase and installation of the cellular distributed antenna system for the public safety headquarters in an amount not to exceed $122,300.
Thank you, Ms. Hilbert. Are there any motions with respect to the consent agenda?
I move we approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. So we'll jump then to item E, section E, action items from council, and this would be item E1.
Item E1 is a resolution authorizing an application for the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department's Local Parks Grant Program for improvements at Meadow Lane Park in an estimated total amount of $650,000. That includes the city's match requirement of $325,000.
Good evening, Ms. Conley. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'd like to, here we go. I've been working with the Parks Department recently on a project to improve Meadow Lane Park with grant funds, hopefully from the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department through their local parks program. Meadow Lane Park is approximately an acre, and it may be that not everyone knows where it is because it's a neighborhood park, but it's between Ben Wilson and Delmar at the corner of Meadow Lane and Lova Drive. The park was dedicated in 1952. It was identified in the park's master plan as a park with kind of a low condition because of its age. It hasn't been updated in quite a few years. And the demographics of the area, predominantly Hispanic, with more than 85% of households having children 12 years of age or younger. And I have a little bit better map. This is from Google Maps. You can see there where the outline of the park, and just south of there is, a few blocks south of there is O'Connor Elementary. And so the cost share required for this grant program is 50-50. So with the total of $650, that means the city's share would be $325,000. We propose to upgrade the sidewalks and add ADA ramps to increase accessibility into the park, along with adding a concrete path that'll go from the edge of the park around up to the play area and then over to the basketball court. The basketball court will be refurbished with improved service and new goals. A new play structure will be included with a new swing set, and then the shaded bench that will be facing the play area for parents to sit and watch their children. We'll improve the picnic tables and shade structures, there's a lot of old grills there. We're gonna take all those out and put in one nice new one. We're gonna add a little bit of lighting and a privacy fence along the two sides of the park, have a border of private property, and right now some of that's just open to people's backyards, so we would add fencing there. And then we would, of course, improve the landscaping. The application is due August 1st. TPWD is very good about publishing their timeline. We'll announce awards in January 2026, and then there's a period where we'll do contract and some other administrative details, but construction could begin as early as summer, early fall 2026. Any residents who want to give us feedback, or have questions, concerns, or want to express support, please feel free to contact me. My contact information is there. Or they can call the Parks and Recreation Department at 361-485-3200.
Thank you very much for the information. Are there any questions on this?
No?
I'm sorry?
No questions. I do appreciate investing in our parks and particularly where there's kids located.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, it makes all the sense in the world. I think it'd be a great upgrade for the park and for that neighborhood. It'd be fantastic, so. All right, thank you. Then I will entertain any motions with respect to item E1.
I move we adopt E1.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, item E1 passes, and we'll keep our fingers crossed for approval. Thank you. All right, moving then to section F, city managers reports. Mr. Garza.
Good evening again. We do have a guest with us this evening who's going to be providing an overview of the most recent legislative session. Derek Farrell, Assistant City Manager, has been direct point of contact on this item for us during the entire session, and he's tuning in virtually, hence the camera setup. He's already in God's country, as the mayor likes to say. But joining us is Monty Nguyen, the Director of Legislative Services and Jack of all trades for Texas Municipal League. And also in January will become the new Executive Director of the Texas Municipal League. And so Monty, welcome and congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Welcome. Great to have you this evening.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. It's good to be here. And more than anything, it's good to be home. I'm a 1990 graduate of Victoria High School, back when we were the Stingarees. And so my wife asked me, you sure that's not the Stingrays? I'm like, no, I'm sure it's the Stingarees. And so, but thank you all for having me. It's good to be here. We're kind of in between this time of session ending and a special session starting. So kind of wanted to, I was asked by Derek and Jesus to give an overview of kind of what went on during the session, what we could expect in the special as well. It was a session of big numbers. We came into this session with a $24 billion surplus. The legislature had a $33 billion surplus the session before last, so healthy finances at the state level. The legislature passed a $338 billion biennial budget, so the largest in its history, 1.2% over all funds over 24-25, and 5.1% in GR and tax-related funds over that same time period. So big numbers. The state is also sitting on what is about a constitutionally capped ESD, Economic Stabilization Fund, or Rainy Day Fund, at $26 billion. So the state is flush with cash. Some of the other big items from this session that took some of the oxygen out of the room during the 140 days, education savings accounts. The legislature passed Senate Bill 2 that provides for 100,000 education savings accounts for our Texas school children. So spent $1 billion to provide those to 100,000 kids out of the 5.8 million school children in Texas. So the largest of its kind across the country, but took a lot of effort on behalf of the legislature. On the flip side of that, it was historic funding on public ed funding, $8.5 billion in new public school funding. So not only do we have this $1 billion spent for education savings accounts, but healthy inflow of public dollars into our public schools. And then a lot of the energy of the room in the legislature this session was how do we return some of that surplus back to our taxpayers? I thought the legislature made great use of that money and returning that to taxpayers as well as investing in infrastructure. The legislature passed Senate Bill 4 and Senate Bill 23, which provides for a $140,000 homestead exemption. 23 provides for a $200,000 for our seniors. And then House Bill 9 was the other piece of that property tax relief that will some way impact cities across the state. And that was an increase in the business personal property tax exemption. What was currently $2,500 to now $125,000. So the House's version was $250,000. The Senate's version was $25,000. They settled on that exemption at $125,000. So that will have some impact moving forward on budgets. Senate Bill 7 was the big water bill. This was a big issue this session and last on how do we provide money for new water supply and new infrastructure. And as we talk about water here today, it's a big issue across the state. The legislature passed House Bill 7 and HGR 7. HGR will be before the voters in November, but will provide for $1 billion a year for the next 20 years in new water supply funding and infrastructure money. They'll take the $1 billion off the top of the sales tax collections every year, over $46 billion, and put that in account for water. And so good money spent on water and water funding. The other big priority bill of the legislature was Senate Bill 9, and that was bail reform. And so that sort of in a nutshell was the leadership priorities. The governor obviously sets the agenda, and those were some of his items that were passed in the session. So you ask yourself, you got all that done, why are we coming back in a special session? And we'll be back on Monday. All special sessions, for those of you who don't know, are 30 days in duration, can only be called by the governor, and the governor sets the agenda. That agenda is sort of in flux now. He has issued a list of items, primarily THC regulation. He vetoed a bill this session that would provide or eliminated a lot of these shops around towns selling THC and CBD. The governor vetoed that, so that's back on the agenda for the special. Congressional redistricting, undertaking a big look at the maps this special session, as well as some of the city-related issues like revenue limitations and budget expenditure limitations. And so we'll have a whole host of items next week. There'll be a lot of discussion, as you can imagine, on disaster recovery after the floods of last week. And so they'll spend a lot of time in the next 30 days looking at response to that and how do the state and cities and others respond to natural disasters. I think the biggest number of the session this year, and it's in your packet that I think Derek gave you, was there were 9,014 bills filed this session. You think about that in a context of 140 days with really 60 days of bill filing and about 80 days of discussion, that was a new record. And so that was about 800 more bills filed than last session. Of those 9,014, 2,189 impact cities at some level. So there's probably no other more legislatively scrutinized entity at the state level than cities. And that was evident again this year. A full quarter of what they consider impacts what you do back here in home. So let me talk a little bit about the city-specific issues. I think the story this session was more what didn't pass than what did. And so I'll mention some items that didn't, because we know some will be back either next week or even next session. So two big buckets I'll kind of mention. One, tax, debt, and finance, and then land use and development. But tax and debt, we saw this session proposals that would have brought down your voter approval rate from the 3.5 to something lower. We saw proposals this session, again, that would put an expenditure cap on cities. The last session's or the regular session's proposal was for population times inflation cap. We're likely to see that same proposal again in the special session. Local sales tax sourcing was a big issue this session, changing from origin sourcing to destination sourcing. That would obviously have a big impact on many cities across the state, would be likely winners under a scenario where sales tax was sourced to the destination. That got a little further this year than previous sessions, didn't pass, but will be likely just one more step each session before it does. But it's been a long look at sales tax sourcing. Debt limitations were a big issue this session. We saw proposals that would have eliminated your ability to issue COs. I don't know if y'all have issued COs anytime recently, but the proposals at the state level were to eliminate the ability to use those for roads, water, wastewater, and some of the big issues that cities across the state issue those for, as well as the elimination of the May uniform election date. That got a little bit further this go around, made it out of the Senate, went to the House. But there is a big movement to eliminate that May date for all tax rate elections and all debt issuances, but for all council elections as well. So didn't pass this session, but will likely probably be on the agenda for next go around. And some of these issues are perennial issues that don't get past one. It might take 10 years to pass something, but it'll be back. Some of the issues that passed dealing with debt and financing, House Bill 103 and House Bill 3526 are debt reporting requirements for cities now. You're now required to report your debt issuances and some of your tax information for the last 10 years to the controller and to the bond review board. We'll be running notifications towards the end of the year. That's not till September or January 1st. So look for those notifications for reporting to both the controller and to the bond review board. We talked about audits. Y'all approved an item for an audit. Most cities do their audits, but some cities have not, usually the smaller cities. If you haven't done it every year and filed that audit with your city secretary 180 days after it's complete, currently there are no penalties. The House bill, or Senate bill, 1851 from this last session instituted a no new revenue rate penalty. So if you don't file your audit, the AG investigates, you can be held, the city can be held at their no new revenue rate. So I know y'all are on top of that, but some aren't, and that could catch some cities up. As well as housing finance corporations. I don't know if y'all have any housing finance corporations around here or have dealt with public facility corporations. We closed a loophole 2 sessions ago that sort of cut off this ability of sponsoring entities, which can be a housing authority or a city or a county, partnering with the developer and going into a neighboring community, maybe not even neighboring, but not their own, and pulling property off the tax rolls. And so that was called the traveling PFC issue was closed 2 sessions ago, now gives the council the ability to veto that. Well, developers moved from the PFC statute to the HFC statute to do some of the same work, and so that loophole was closed this session as well. Some of the land use issues, there's a lot of talk this last couple of sessions on housing affordability, and it's a national issue, largely in our bigger cities, but the narrative around housing affordability was city zoning and density standards. And so there was a large look this session on mandated density for our communities. There were some bills that passed that don't impact y'all. They were bracketed to cities over 150,000 and counties of 300,000 or more. And I only mention it because a lot of times what they do with bracketed bills, the legislatures, they'll bracket it one session, come back and pull the bracket off. But those provided, I don't know if y'all have heard us talk about the tiny lot bill, prohibiting you from having lot size. Previous versions were over 1,400 square feet. This version settled in on 3,000 square feet, so slightly larger. But there was a large look at this mandated density for our communities. Some of the issues that didn't pass this session, we've seen this reform of annexation over the years. In 17, we saw the removal of the ability of cities to unilaterally annex. And so we started seeing this progression of that. But then it called into question the ETJ and what purpose is the ETJ. You know, cities would develop and then annex and have some uniform growth. But then after last session's Senate Bill 2038 that allowed folks to get out of the ETJ pretty easily, it's almost, the concept of the ETJ is almost eliminated. And so we thought maybe this session we would see some final death knells to the ETJ. It's on life support, but I'm sure you are seeing folks in y'all's ETJ petition to be removed. And so a little look at that. Third-party review was an issue this session that didn't pass, allowing for developers to go straight to a third party for the review of development documents, and that sort of this privatization of a public function. So we're seeing this, but that didn't pass this session as well as accessory dwelling units by right. This is an issue that we've seen the last couple of sessions that would have said that cities couldn't have any say over the allowance of ADUs in their cities. That didn't pass as well. So what did? Some of the housing affordability. You know, we know that housing affordability is really a function of many factors. Interest rates and inventory and, and zoning it to some extent. And so we saw Senate Bill 15, which is the tiny lot bill that doesn't apply yet to y'all, but could in the future, as well as allowing for the conversion of downtown office buildings. A lot of look at as post-COVID, we had office buildings closed, or what are we doing with those vacant office buildings and allowing for the conversion of those into residential. And so that passed as well. For those of y'all in fast growing, I know Victoria is probably not in the fast growth category, but as we look at development and impact fees, there was a long look at impact fees, particularly this session. In the interim, there was a lot of chatter in some of the important committees about the elimination of impact fees altogether. So we were a little concerned with that dialogue, but what passed was Senate Bill 1883, and we work with the home builders on this issue to say that you can't increase your impact fees until every 3 years, and with some phase-in of that impact fee to kind of help developers, but allowing you and your developers to work together on those impact fees. And then House Bill 2559 is a development moratorium bill. You can only issue 2 development moratoria in 180 days, and so kind of a look at development. A couple other bills, and I encourage y'all, I think under this memo here, there's a list of all the bills that passed and summaries, and this is something that we do. We read every single bill, we summarize it, we kind of digest it. And so I encourage you to take a look at this for all the bills. I've given this presentation in 6 hours, in 2 hours, in 30 minutes, and I was told I had 15, and so I've cut it down pretty short. But I want to mention a few other bills that did pass. One is Senate Bill 1173, and that's an increase in the competitive bidding threshold from 50,000 to 100,000. So I think a good bill that updates that. I don't think that 50,000 has been updated for 20 years or so, and so gives you some flexibility in purchasing. And then I mentioned this one only because I've been asked about it a lot, and that is House Bill 762 and Senate Bill 2237, and that deals with severance packages. This was an issue that wasn't necessarily aimed at city managers or city employees, but it caught up those of the employees that you do offer severance agreements to, as well as superintendents and others. But capping that severance pay at 5 months, 20 weeks, that applies for any severance agreement entered into after September 1st. And so just a few of the top line items, Mayor, that passed this session, some that didn't. Again, we'll be reporting from Austin on the special session, so we encourage you to check our legislative updates each Friday that go out, and we'll keep you up to date on what goes on. Mayor, I'll be happy to answer any questions on those issues or any other items.
Money, I have a few, I'm sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
I thought I talked fast.
I know, I'm so used to, after 30 years of legislative work, just trying to say things as fast as I can, so I got to remind myself to slow down.
I know. Obviously, there's been more pressing things at the front of our minds, but I emailed you a legislative update too from the Friday update that he's referring to. And if you didn't get a chance to review the documents that Derek attached to the AIM, please review those and feel free to reach out with any questions. I did want to ask you about a couple bills specifically. And so currently, we're not a civil service community, but the Firefighters Association did successfully submit a petition. And so at our upcoming council meeting, we'll be calling the election for civil service for firefighters to be on the November ballot. And so can you speak to HB 2713, which is the prohibits the repealing of it?
Yeah, I can. I was going to look it up, but I'll try to recall it from memory. In current statute, there's a prohibition for cities over 950,000 to repeal civil service after it's been in place a year. This bill brought that bracket from 950, and I forget what the final bracket, maybe 50,000?
Yeah, I believe so.
So it just says if you have civil service for a year, you cannot repeal that.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
I think that's relevant,
Yeah.
for the upcoming election for us. One of the things that we struggle with quite a bit is employee retention and recruitment, specifically as it relates to first responders. I don't know if you have any information or if you recall off the top of your head, details around the grants for supplemental income.
There were some grants for public safety that were all good. Now, there were some income benefits for retired officers. I think that was 4414. I'll have to go back and look. I'm sorry, Basis.
It's okay.
I don't. I'll look at that one and then I'll follow up with you.
Sorry we didn't get a chance to touch base before
No,
today.
no, it's all good.
But it's 4264.
4264.
4264.
Oh, yeah. Grants for peace officers with mastery proficiency certificate.
Yeah.
Let me look at the summary if you want to give me a second, or if not, I can. Let me follow up with you, Jesus.
Okay.
Instead of
No,
scrambling
that's
to
good.
go through.
That's cool.
I try to. I try to remember as many bill numbers and things as possible, but
Yeah,
it's
and then
a lot.
one of the other ones.
There were 9,000 something.
Yeah,
It really kind of all rolls
I
together.
have very high expectations of you.
I know, yeah.
One of the ones that is already beginning to impact some internal processes that we have is the change in the public meeting notice. Right, 1522.
Yep.
I'm sure that one you do recall off the top of your head. 'Cause
Yeah, it changes public notices from 72 hours to 3 business days. And the posting of budgets and things like that. That came from a small city of Smithville outside of Austin, where the state rep and the city kind of had some headbutting, and that's a response to what he proposed. And so that just moves your council agenda posting probably a day or two
Right.
back.
Yeah, so currently, we have up until 5 PM on Saturday, basically, to post the agenda. And in this particular instance, April made a change on Saturday to add the CIP update that I'll go over on the SCADA in a few minutes. But this new law would require us to basically post on the end of the day, Thursday. And so it obviously moves up, our internal processes and timelines for just to get anything done.
And is that for any notice or only notices that pertain to the tax rate and budget?
That's for any notice.
Any notice?
Yeah,
Okay.
there are some provisions on posting of the budget.
Yeah,
for
I knew
those
there were some
specific-
specific
and-
ones.
And our understanding is that it also applies to all of the boards and commissions that
Yeah.
would fall under the Open Meetings Act, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And we've got some guidance on our website that we put out this week, kind of showing you, if your city hall is closed on Friday, or if there's a holiday on Friday, what does that mean? And so encourage y'all to take a look at that as well.
And I'm going to jump in.
Yeah.
I was incorrect in, remember, no, we have to post by Wednesday at 5 o'clock now in order to post by Tuesday. And then we'll have to bump that forward if there's a holiday or something like that in between.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you for the information. Welcome home. Good to have you
Thank
here.
you. I
And
appreciate it.
we'll look forward to, I know that they do a lot up there and it's a lot to keep track of. So we appreciate your efforts in helping us keep track as well.
Absolutely.
And we'll see what happens to us in the special session.
Sounds good.
All
Thanks.
right.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Yeah.
And we'll keep rolling. So next up on the agenda, Tiffany will provide a brief update on the child safety program.
Good evening, Ms. Toda.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am presenting tonight's proposed program for the child safety grants, as the grant applications will be opening up at the end of this month. And so this is just a reminder of some background information of the program establishment. This discussions on this particular program began back in August of 2019 when council adopted a resolution that the county presented in regards to the child safety fee. This fee is collected on vehicle registrations, and the city receives a portion of this funding to help fund this program. We let this program funding build for a couple of years before officially establishing that back in October of 2021. And then tonight we're proposing showing you all the program for this next year. Our Child Safety Committee is comprised of 5 people. We have two from the Finance Department, specifically the Grants Division, Katie and Victoria. Myself, as the Program Administrator of this particular funding, Kevin, who is in the Legal Department, and then Sergeant Allen of the Police Department. The program eligibility, it goes over a few different categories here. So we have organizations that are eligible to apply for funding are nonprofit, non-taxing entities that operate within the city limits of Victoria. The numbers that they provide to us show those children they're serving within the city limits. The eligible use categories that the funding is allocated towards includes child safety and or abuse intervention and prevention programs and drug and or alcohol or substance abuse intervention programs for children. They have documentation requirements that need to be submitted, which is now going to be an online form that we will have on our website. And they also need to submit with that the program budget form, the IRS 990, and the tax exemption designation letter. And then our committee does review that information, and we provide them their notification of funding at the end of that. And so this is what our application timeline here is going to look like for this year. Applications will open on Monday, July 28th at 8 a.m. They will close at 5 p.m. on Friday, August the 15th. Our committee will then meet and review these applications, and then the funding notification will be provided to those grant recipients. And then we will bring this back to City Council before final adoption of that with the recommended funding allocation, in which contracts will then become effective after October 1st. And so for this year's program, we are looking at a funding for the grants of $55,000, which is consistent in years past. Last year, we did increase that number slightly, and then this year we shifted some funding around for program administration fees. And so some of the funding we have will be allocated towards salaries of staff that work on this program to help alleviate some general fund savings. And then we also have the car seat program, which is still part of this particular program that we have funding allocated, and we shifted some funding from that as well to help alleviate some of that. The projected funding imbalance I have on this screen is actually for end of this fiscal year. So $210,374 is what we anticipate ending at this fiscal year. With the next year's proposed program, we're looking at an ending fund balance of $192,020.93. I just wanted to clarify that number there. And I am happy to answer any questions you all may have about this particular program.
Any questions anyone has? No, obviously a very important program, and we appreciate all the effort that goes into it.
Thank you. I am appreciative of council's support of this program, and our grant recipients are as well.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Toad. Mr. Garza, I believe you have a capital improvement plan update for us?
Yes, sir. So this is the item that I alluded to earlier about the prioritization or reprioritization of the SCADA, or the system that basically handles the data for our water and our sewer system. I thought, for the benefit of maybe new viewers and as a refresher to you, I thought I'd go through a few slides just summarizing what it is and what the role of SCADA is, and a little bit of the timeline of why we have yet to replace it. Bless you. Bless you. I hope that was a sneeze. So as I mentioned earlier, the SCADA system monitors and manages our water infrastructure in real time. And it includes sensors, networks, control software. It includes quite a bit of technology. Our current SCADA is the same SCADA that came with the plant when the plant was built and completed in 2001. And so it's quite outdated with as much progress there's been in technology over the last couple of decades. Where it's primarily used, it's used at our water treatment plants, pump stations, storage tanks, distribution network, wastewater collection and treatment. It's used throughout the system. I don't know why some of those words are bigger than others. Thanks, James. Huh? Is that what it was? Yeah. Storage. I got to emphasize the word. Storage tanks. All right. So it's important because it provides an opportunity for real-time monitoring of pressure, flow, tank levels, remote control of pumps and valves, early detection of system failures, automated alerts, and historical data. It really is the brains behind our water system. And we do have one, so don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to suggest that we don't have one. We do have one. But again, it's over 2 decades old. Having a more modernized system, as James has suggested and presented in previous presentations, would ensure that we just maintain safe and reliable water delivery, because it'll help us maybe catch issues sooner than what maybe the human element of it might be able to catch. Of course, with that also comes improved efficiency, supports regulatory compliance if applicable, and of course, overall, it enhances public health, and could potentially reduce downtime and damage if it's used in a proactive maintenance to catch things like deferred maintenance issues or any other issue. I already mentioned the age limitation of it. I know that James has extensively, in previous presentations, covered the topic of the vulnerabilities of the system as it relates to cyber exposure. I won't go into the details of that, but we recognize that having a more modern system would also be able to better protect us from those cyber threats that unfortunately have become way too common. Again, I know I'm being redundant, but the goal is to invest in a modern SCADA that will allow and improve our resiliency, help build redundancy, especially, as I mentioned earlier, just having a very human-centric operation, strengthen cybersecurity, and potentially just allow us to scale for future growth. And so as an example, we're going through our overarching water study right now, right, that may lead to an opportunity to diversify our water source. And it would be nice to have a sophisticated SCADA system that would be able to attach to whatever that is, right? I mean, if it ends up being a separate, brackish water treatment facility, right? A system that would be nimble enough to be able to grow with our system, as opposed to being a system that is very specific to our water plant. I forgot to mention this earlier, but currently our SCADAs aren't in sync. And so it's a different SCADA for water than it is for sewer as well. And so that also just provides some inefficiencies amongst staff. The issue of having an antiquated SCADA was really heightened after Winter Storm Uri. You may recall that Winter Storm Uri and the effect of Winter Storm Uri was this unfortunate situation that led to certain gauges freezing over, and eventually led to realizing that we didn't have water in some of our storage tanks, and the system wasn't alerting us of it. And so at the time, after the after-action review after Winter Storm Uri, is when we really started to do a full court press on analyzing the SCADA. We had an initial design completed that same year in 2021 because we did want to be fairly aggressive with trying to address the lack of technology in our system. That did come with a price tag. And so as an example, in order to replace both SCADA systems for water and sewer, it's basically north of $6 million. And so once we started to get a sense of the scope of the cost, we decided to try and pursue grant opportunities to try and fund it. An opportunity arose, ironically, that same year, in that there was basically leftover money from Hurricane Harvey that had gone unutilized. And yes, you heard that right. Money from Hurricane Harvey that has been funneled for years as part of that recovery effort. And so what I mean by leftover money is that, money funnels down from the federal government, the state administers it predominantly through the GLO, and sometimes communities don't accept the money, or sometimes they don't comply with the requirements, and it basically puts the money back in the pot. And so in 2021, the state decided to take a different approach to administering this leftover pot of money, and in essence put the onus on regional planning commissions. Previous to this, the original iteration of the CDBG MIT program stemming from Hurricane Harvey was a very direct process between us as the municipality and the GLO. So the difference here was that now you had a middleman basically in the Regional Planning Commission. And I know that Mark is probably getting a headache thinking back to that whole process, because it was a very intensive process that our Regional Planning Commission went through to try and figure out how to allocate $80 million. Our Regional Planning Commission not only represents Victoria, but the surrounding counties. And so as you can imagine, there's just a difference in opinion. We just have a couple spots on that board, right? So some of you may recall Mark's efforts and Josie's at the time to adequately represent and fight to maximize the amount of money out of that 80 million assigned to our COG. Ultimately, we were assigned roughly $20 million from that 80 million to go towards our projects. But you can see based off this timeline how long it took to get from the moment that the Regional Planning Commission got that contract from the GLO to the moment that we were able to submit official grant applications. It was a while, almost 2 years. And so in November of 2023, we submitted those grant applications for 3 projects. For the SCADA program for both water and sewer, an influent screen facility replacement, and for the Lone Tree Drainage Project. Remember, these projects have to be attached to flood mitigation, particularly caused by Harvey. And so in our particular case, SCADA doesn't necessarily automatically off the top of your mind might scream drainage, but I wasn't here at the time, so y'all would remember better than me that Harvey caused a big issue at the surface water treatment plant, which caused one of those more intense boil water notices because it came with no water for a little bit. So this whole process has basically dragged on longer than anybody anticipated that it would. And so, unfortunately, it's led to us just not following through with the project in as timely of a manner that we thought we would have back in 2021 when we developed the plan. And so in light of what has just happened with this situation and the potential, and I want to use that word very intentional, potential correlation between the lack of the modern SCADA and the situation that has us under the boil water notice currently. And I say potential because there really is no way to know at this time whether having a modernized system would have made a difference. That's certainly something that as a committee we can take a deeper dive in, but it certainly wouldn't have had hurt to have the more modern SCADA system in place. And so rather than continuing to wait for the GLO to approve our project, I'd like to present to you an option that would, with certainty, move up the SCADA a prioritization project to be part of fiscal year 26 budget, which of course we're in the middle of developing, and you will be approving in the next couple of months. So as I mentioned, one of the projects that we're recommending funding out of CDBG MIT is the Influence Green project at the Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant. This is roughly a $6 million project. Now, let me take a step back. I mentioned that we were approved for $20 million. This is 2 years ago, so these numbers are old, right? But 2 years ago, these projects were a total of $22 million. So we knew that we were gonna have to contribute some local money to basically match the $20 million in order to complete those projects. And so in the preliminary budget for fiscal year 26, we have allocated nearly $2 million from VSTDC to basically make up the difference that would be needed to complete this project if we receive the $4 million through the CDBG MIT program. And of course, that's a big if, because we've been moving this program for I think we're about to enter our third fiscal year of just moving it along, right? So this is the recommendations, and I'll walk through some implementations here in a bit. But the recommendation is to basically unprioritize that project to prioritize SCADA and put a hold on this project. Putting a hold on this project would, in essence, free up that nearly $2 million that we currently have in fiscal year 26 that we can redirect to go towards the water SCADA project. Now, I mentioned that SCADA for both water and sewer was roughly $6 million. Just for the water portion of it, it's about $3.6 million. So again, it would just be a reprioritization so that we can free up that nearly $2 million. And so if you're asking yourself, well, where would the rest of it come from? What we're basically then suggesting is to also re-examine how we allocate money from VSTDC to go towards the community center project. If you've figured one thing from the Gilbert and Jesus combo is that we are extremely creative with how to shuffle things around to prioritize things that are important to us. And so what we're suggesting here is that currently we've made the commitment that VSTDC is going to contribute to the community center project over 2 to 3 years. We're suggesting we change that philosophy and spread that out over a longer period of time to 4 or 5 years to, in essence, lessen the amount of money that is coming from VSTDC towards the community center project, and thus freeing up that roughly $1.6 million that could make us whole to proceed with the water SCADA project. Now, to be clear, I'm not asking you to decide this tonight. I'm simply presenting this to you so you can reflect on the options in the scenario where we want to be more aggressive with prioritizing doing the water SCADA aspect of the project. Now, I did not have the time to put together some additional slides to talk to you about the implications aspect of this. And so the moment that we decided, which was on Saturday, to Gilbert and I were in the office on Saturday trying to kind of figure out, I shouldn't take credit for this. He was in the office, I was in the office too, but he was doing this in the office on Saturday trying to come up with a way to fund the SCADA project. And immediately I reached out to Ardura. Ardura is the firm that we hired to help us and help Katie manage through this whole process. You may recall that Ardura has Molly, who used to work for the GLO and was one of the biggest attractive things about hiring Ardura through that RFQ process was having Molly being part of that team. And so Molly has done a lot of phone calls over the last 72 hours to try and get some definitive answers as to what would happen if we pull the water SCADA project out of the CDBG MIT application. It would do one of two things. It would require it to do an amendment, which would, by default, delay the other projects that would remain being funded out of the CDBG MIT list. which may not necessarily be a bad thing, right? Because if we're intentionally taking that $2 million that was going to match the screening project, delaying that screening project is probably okay because we need that $2 million in 26 anyway. Now, I know that Mark and I have had a conversation about this because obviously Mark has been intimately involved with the CDBG MIT, the whole thing from the very beginning. Mark, you asked me a very, very pointed, specific question, which was or is, can we replace the project with another project? We've looked into that, and what is realistically gonna happen and what realistically happened is that because the pricing for the remaining projects are 2 years old, the pricing of those projects are likely to go up. And so if we pull out SCADA from CDBG MIT, we save $3.6 million, right, from the CDBG MIT, but that 3.6, quite frankly, are probably gonna be needed to fund Lone Tree Acres, because Lone Tree Acres is now gonna realistically cost more than what it did when we submitted that grant 2 years ago. And so we don't think there's actually gonna be an opportunity to add a project if we pulled SCADA out, because that money more than likely would have to be redirected to actually fund fully the remaining projects if you're gonna start them 3 years after you applied for the grant. Now, Molly's recommendation and my recommendation to all of you is to do a full court press. Full court press on our state senator's office, state rep's office, to hopefully put some pressure on the GLO to just approve these projects. Because we need them done. And obviously, because of things going on across the state, rightfully so, right now, a lot of individuals are very mindful of the need to not wait to invest in critical infrastructure that could help communities deal with situations in a better manner. And so now would be the time to put a full court press on our state elected officials to put pressure on the GLO. So I do think that it's worthwhile, maybe over the next couple of weeks, all of us collectively trying to do that. But know that there is an option in the scenario where we want to pull SCADA, to prioritize SCADA. So, yeah. Oops. Did you post? Okay.
I got a question.
Yes.
As we're waiting for funding through that, the
Did you hear me?
other communities, have they received any of their funding for their projects?
Very few.
Yeah, I think,
There's like 20-some projects, and maybe 1 or 2 have actually received funding.
in my checking on this, it appears that it lies at the GLO level in terms of just dragging feet, whatever issues. I don't know if it's process, I don't know if it's people, what it is in terms of approving projects to get that money out, because we're not the only community that, we're now in our 3rd budget cycle waiting on these funds that have been approved. We just don't have them yet. So certainly I think the idea to, try and find out what's going on, talk with our state elected officials and see if we can get some information, I think is a good one, and we will follow up on that very quickly to see if we can get some action on that.
And I think it's great that you have an option, because you're right, maybe the other projects will cost more money. I just want to make sure all the money gets spent. If it doesn't get spent, it goes back. And
Right.
if you didn't spend it, then you can't get a reallocation of the money that wasn't spent.
Right. Well, and keep in
You're
mind
out
that even if the pricing on all those projects didn't change,
Right.
we were already going to have to contribute $2 million of our own money.
Yeah.
And so even if we did just simply pull out water SCADA to free up that 3.6,
That's a good option.
that difference could still make us whole for the screen project. That would cause us to not have to later find $2 million somewhere else to match that, because it would be taken care of as part of the 20 now. So.
Thank you for all
That
the
makes
points
sense.
you made.
Okay.
We do need a full court press.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions on this effort? Okay. One last thing. I'm happy to report that we received the test back from the health department, and as expected, all is good. And so the press release hasn't gone out already. I'm sure Ashley's about to click enter on that. And so as expected, we are rescinding the boil water notice effective now.
Very good.
So,
Thank you for the information.
yeah,
That was the best thing you told me all night.
I know, right?
I understand we will not have an executive session.
If this mic
correct?
was droppable, I would drop it, but
I understand we do not have an executive session, correct?
no, sir.
Okay, we are out at 6:39.